we call upon the next keynote session speaker of the day, Ms. Tanu. Ms. Tanu is going to present the topic on Uncomplicated, the technical SEO audit, uncover common issues preventing your site from ranking. And about Ms. Tanu, is an accomplished digital marketer developing transformational business strategy for a digital world. She has over 20 years of experience in B2B and B2C digital marketing. Her experience spans digital analytics, SEO, and paid search. She developed an SEO framework to research and execute product-level digital optimization that drove the strategy for over 200 plus key product projects, completed worldwide, resulting in increased ranking, traffic, engagement, and lead generation. The approach won IBM CMO Award and an industry award. I welcome Ms. Tanu for presenting the topic under this 5th GDMS conference.
Thank you. A quick check if everyone can see the screen. Yes. If I do have dual screens, I want to make sure the right slides are showing up.
Yes, we can be able to see your video as well as your screens also. Thank you so much. Please proceed.
So it is this screen, correct? That you can see?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So I can begin. I know many different folks have joined from different parts of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from where you're joining. I'm Tanu Javeri. Today I'm here to share with you my thoughts on Uncomplicate, the technical SEO audit. Over the years, I've held multiple roles in digital marketing and digital analytics space. Currently, I am the head of SEO for Foundry, formerly known as IDG. Since 1964, Foundry has been creating media and software solutions. Just a quick disclaimer, none of the Foundry data or slides have been used in preparing of this presentation. It will be purely SEO knowledge-based presentation. So let's quickly get into what is technical SEO. If we look at this image that was used in an article by Andy Bates, it was published in Search Engine Journal. This image talks a lot about the history of technical SEO from the early starts of 2000s and where we find ourselves today. The journey of websites or digital environment actually started with codes and making sure that the content was crawlable and indexable. And then came the mid-2000s where we found ourselves with the black hat SEO, where it was very rampant and Google algorithms couldn't keep up. Of course, soon towards the end of 2000s, Google did catch up. And then we heard this term of SEO being part of the mainstream marketing package or techniques that we had to follow. Soon in the search industry, we heard terms like Panda, Penguin, there were updates, Google updates, core updates. These were ways of Google's way to tell us the penalties that the sites could get because of thin content or low quality content. As the decade moved on, if you look at what happened in the mid 2010s, we saw that there was a very strong foundation of SEO and content that got established. Technical also was still a concept of how this content was actually rendered. But more importantly, things that started to impact were social and video that became a part of what search would be about. If you see the last 5 to 7 years, we saw dramatic changes. One of the most important was actually how the search was screen would render. The SERP actually changed. We had the emergence of voice, we had the emergence of digital assistants, and guess what happened? Today, we stand at another update from Google, which is talking about helpful content, talking about core updates. And we find ourselves again at that juncture of saying, is the site crawlable? And is the content unique and useful for our users? So it's almost like a full circle that we have had. Now, if you think of what would be the pillars of a technical SEO, I can say broadly that there are 3 ways to look at it. First, we should ensure that the content can be crawled and indexed by all major search engines. Second would be, what is the site hierarchy? Are the URL structures good enough for the search engines to be able to crawl and also for the users to navigate? And of course, this structure should be actually allowing or facilitating the flow of internal link equities through the site. The third is the speed. The old saying that, patience is a virtue may probably not apply when you are on a website, because we actually want any pages that we want to service or visit to load quickly. If we encounter slow pages, it does, as a user, we feel that why do we have to wait so long? And that applies to your users or the websites that you cater for. So always improve the UX, the page load time, and you will see that the conversions or even the sales revenue actually reflect at the changes in page load time that you bring. If I have to relate it with any of the changes that are currently happening, I would say look into where your core vitals are. That would be a great place for you to understand how your page load system is actually impacting your overall website health. So now that I mentioned core vitals and where can you get this information, it is your Google Search Console. It is important and very powerful tool that a business owner or marketer, or if you're an SEO specialist, that can use to understand how the organic traffic is coming. How is Google search actually considering your website? Sometimes as a novice user, people are not necessarily in tune, or we can say that Google Search Console is not intuitive to use, but there are three main sections that you can look into when you think about what information you can get. One is the performance that actually gives you the information on search results, which would be in this section. And it kind of tells you about how well you're performing in search, discovery, news, and things like that. Index allows you to see the valid and invalid URLs. And this is a very important part to understand what portion of your websites are, or what URLs are actually being rendered, are being considered valid in terms of code, in terms of other requirements that Google has. And then these valid URLs actually get shown into the search in results. The ones which are invalid allow you to say, okay, there is improvement that has to be done. Now that improvement could be technical or content-based. And of course, also look into the sitemap in the same section, because that allows us to understand how the search engine is actually evaluating your website. If the search my report actually shows a status of success, that's all good. But you could also find at times that it actually says has error or couldn't fetch. Both of these results are saying that there is a problem and then we need to go in and check. Experience section, which is right here, is where you can get information for core vitals. And if you have been keeping up with news, you would notice that right now Google has started to provide information of core vitals per URL as well. So that's a great place to start evaluating your URL performance. Now, we talked about sitemap a little bit in the previous slide. What is a sitemap? It is basically telling the search engines about the website structure, telling them how to discover new pages, which pages to crawl. And if we get this right, we can actually give the search engines, literally think of it from a map perspective, your highways and your roadways, and it can navigate and crawl. Same thing for your users as well. Typically, sitemaps are of two formats, the HTML one, which typically is used by your users, and the XML one, which is specifically for the search engine. So if you want a search engine spider to crawl your site, ensure that you have actually submitted an XML version to their particular console. So in this case, Google Search Console. You can also leverage Google Search Console to actually remove, delete, or resubmit a particular sitemap. If you do want to check as to where or how your sitemap looks, you could use tools like Screaming Frog, or you can even put sitemap.xml onto a browser for your particular website and find what your sitemap looks like. Do ensure that it is correct and valid, because it does make a difference as to how the search engines actually crawl your website. As the search engines start to crawl your content, some of the issues that they can come across, or when you log into Google Search Console to see your performance and your valid URLs or invalid URLs, you may find that there is something called as duplicate content. The reason I start with duplicate content up front is because that is one of the most common problem people find, and it can be a big SEO performance barrier. Now, duplicate content doesn't necessarily mean that there is a third party or an external person who has stolen your website or copied your content and, without permissions and done that. If you are an enterprise client or a big enough website, as you publish new content, whether it be blogs, whether it be products, whether it be articles, you would find that as the volume of your pages increase, you might end up having duplicate content. Also, how do you actually create the framework of your website can impact as to when and how duplicate content actually takes place. Now, what does duplicate content entail? In this situation, I'm talking about the content-specific duplication. That means the web page actually contains identical information or nearly identical information, and that can lead to several problems. One, maybe a wrong version of your URL will show up in SERP. Pages may actually not perform well, and search engines may have indexing problem. Actually, measuring the site metrics or performance of these pages can be challenging. It could also lead to the point where search engines actually think that this content is not good or is confusing and actually drop them from the search results as well. So as a SEO personnel, what can you do? Some of the actions that you can do is actually do a canonical tag onto the page to tell Google which is the preferred URL that we want. And of course, canonical tags actually helps transfer the value to the main and primary page that might be. And on the flip side of it, to say is instead of using a canonical tag, actually write good content and maybe actually rewrite the content so that there is no duplication of traffic or content. The next problem or issues that we tend to face when we are doing a technical audit is pagination. What does pagination actually relate to? Pagination relates to pages when companies or websites actually want to show index pages or category pages where they group a list of articles or list of products that the users can actually see. Now, for the search engines, it is very important to crawl these pagination pages. There are folks who actually think that it would be a good idea not to include paginated pages in indexing because it takes up the crawl budget and things like that. That's fair enough. But in that situation, you are actually taking away the option of the search engines to be able to actually crawl any of the listed links on those category or indexes pages. So we should probably include the page 1 of paginated pages in the XML sitemap and allow the search engines to crawl. We should never do no index or no follow for those kind of pages, and it should actually be permissible to be crawled. The other piece that we should certainly check is if this pagination is working through an href attribute or a JavaScript. Although Google does say that they can crawl JavaScript, JavaScript does render issues in crawlability and becomes a challenge. So always ensure that these pagination links actually function. Very recently, or actually around 2015, this change started to hit in where Google and John Mueller from Google mentioned that pagination is not a consolidation of all those pages. They don't take initially In the prior years, the concept was that if you create a pagination, Google would treat anything under the pagination as one single page, as long as you use rel next and rel previous and consolidate into one bucket. But now they consider each page in pagination as an absolute. So a lot of people actually have started to create paginated pages which are absolute and not with a parameter either. So make sure that you are taking that into account as well. And page 2 onwards, you can de-optimize how the pages are actually done, but ensure that this page is actually crawled. Another aspect of pagination is based on your business requirement, decide how you want the pagination to render. Do you want to show first and next, and then the number that the user is on? You may want to create sections where you may have the previous or the first or the next, and then the number of page that you are, and something higher in the series. There are different kind of algorithms that you can leverage to create how the pagination shows up for your user to crawl through. Each pagination system allows you to create the link depth. So experiment based on your business requirements and certainly see which might be most suited for your requirements. The next piece in your technical audit that you should review is robots.txt. It actually tells the search engines which part or which portions of your websites should not be crawled. So it is almost like we are kind of sharing a directive with the search engines to what to crawl or not to crawl. Do remember that this is just a directive and not a mandate. They are still able to crawl this and may index those pages, but may not render them in the search results. How do you check if you have a robots.txt? It is present in Google Search Console, so you can actually look it up there. Or if you want to do it, you can use a tester to do robots.txt to your root domain, and you can find it there. Ensure that you don't have all user agents disallowed. If you have anything that looks like this, that means nothing on your website is being crawled. And I have, in my experience, found out that when websites are migrating, new sites are being created, very often this is how the robots.txt goes. And then we wonder why we are not showing up in Google, because we have blocked every search engine to actually crawl the site or render it on the search results. A better example would be to disallow the sections that you don't want to see, but be careful. Robots.txt is case sensitive. Any changes that you make in this particular section will impact how your website is crawled and which sections are actually rendered into the search results. Many web developers and SEO folks are sometimes tempted to put in a crawl delay directive in a robots.txt file. I don't think so. That's value, and it doesn't add to any SEO gain. So you should probably avoid that. Getting on to the URLs and a little bit of continuation from the duplicate content and how that gets created. If you think of what are the sections of a URL, is one is the protocol, the domain, the subdomain, or the www part of it, the actual domain name, and then the path or the pages that we may be having. When you are creating your URLs or reviewing your URLs, it's really important to see if there is a situation where capitalization or lower cases are getting created, and if they both exist as a unique aspect, or they are actually creating the duplicate URL of the same content. Parameters can do that as well. So it's always good to have user-friendly URLs, which are short and simple. When we don't follow these kind of precautions, we could end up having URLs of the same content or the same page look in multiple format, and this could actually lead to multiple versions. And search engines, to be honest, actually limit their crawls for indexing only the unique and valuable content. At this stage, we are confusing the search engines, and actually they may say that this is confusing and is not unique content, so let's not crawl it, and maybe from your website only few of your pages actually get crawled and then rendered on the search result. The same can actually happen to your domains. I had a client which had the similar problem where they created an HTTP www version, an HTTPS www version, although now HTTP is gone away, so at least that reduces. But then there were different multiple versions of how the domain could be accessed. And to be honest, at one point of time, they were rendering the same URL in 72 different formats. And I'm not making this is an actual business case that I experienced in my life. And they were a very large e-commerce site, and the URLs were probably 2.7 million, but Google was able to identify 55 million URLs because of this non-single domain maintenance. So this also creates duplication, and that actually, once we fix this particular single domain aspect, suddenly they were ranking #1. So please check how your domains render. Now, when this change is happening, you decide one particular single domain and redirect all the other different versions of domains to that one single domain presence that you have selected. Make sure it doesn't just apply to the home page, but actually to the entire website. All pages can be duplicated because of this reason. Many times the solutions are actually put just on home page, and then the rest of the website actually suffers. And then, as we said, your website or pages get disqualified or don't rank to a good position. How do you check this? You can do a screaming frog crawl, and they can pick up any number of URLs. You could also do a spot check by just putting different versions of your website into the browser and see which all render and which actually gets redirected. So that could be a good way to identify where your single domain is functioning or where there may be errors, and that needs to be updated. How do we fix this problem? Now, there are two ways to look at it. A banded solution is you can do the canonical tags, as we talked about the duplicate content. But even in that situation, rewriting the content was important. Similarly, we can do the canonical tags here or disallow the incorrect URLs in robots.txt. But the better solution would be to actually have a better website architecture. Ensure that all other versions of the URL and domain actually 301 redirect, and ensure that when you are building internal links within the website, there is a naming convention that is followed. It's consistent. And when you are defining URL parameters or query string, it doesn't generate duplication, but actually maintains that anything after the parameter or the query is not becoming into an absolute URL, but actually redirects to the absolute URL. What happens when we don't have the URLs functioning? A lot of times we come across these aspects in Search Console, which says broken link. We see an error 404. Why does that actually happen? As I said, if you're a larger client, enterprise client, we tend to write blogs, new products come in, and then eventually there are legacy sites or things that one page gets moved to another place, and we end up having a 404 page. What a broken link is nothing but that there was a hyperlink present on a page, and when a user or the search engines clicked on that hyperlink, it led to a page which said file not found. Now, how do you find these number of 404s that may be present on your website? The best way to do it is you could use anything like Tanu, or you could even do Screaming Frog, and you can actually extract all the broken link URLs from that. You can break it down for outgoing links, which would be going from the domain, or you can repeat steps for in-link, which is within the website where you may be having this issue. Another aspect happens which is that it doesn't actually break, but it redirects. Redirect is a big part of live websites. All of us have redirected a page once or the other because there were domains that were moving, or we were moving a legacy site into a new site, or we were using a different CMS tool. And we can tell both the users as well as the search engines to find the new page. Redirects always falls into categories: permanent and temporary. Permanent is the 301 redirect, which we should probably use every single time. Temporary is, if you have a product which is out of stock and you don't want it to be featured, we can do a 302, but you should avoid something like that. But after a couple of migration, and this is more prominent for companies or websites that have been there for many, many years, they find themselves in a redirect change where, page A goes to page B, and page B goes to page C, and page C goes to page D, and you end up looking at a redirect chain. What does that do? It's very bad for the user experience, slows down the page speed, and of course, eventually have a drop in conversion rate as well. Now, how do we manage these redirect chain? You should certainly read up an article by Href. They have a learning section for SEO, technical SEOs, and they talk about redirecting chain. It's a really great article to read, because it allows you to see where is it leading, what if something breaks, what if there are different loops that you have to do. Again, Screaming Frog is a great place to find these different redirect chain and actually identify where and how these redirects should be managed. Ideally speaking, page A should also go to page D, page B should also go to page D, page C should also go to page D, if that is your final destination. We have talked about 301, 400 in this presentation a little bit. So these are some of the response code. Now, if we talk to any web developer or a technical SEO, we would find that there are about 60 plus HTTP codes that we can use from an SEO perspective, but these 6 are the main ones. It is good and important for SEO folks who want to do a technical SEO to update that, to get familiarized with these codes and understand what kind of backend activities you can recognize. And if you are looking at these codes in your search engines or in Screaming Frog or other SEO tools that you might be using, what possible solutions you can apply and who may be the person you can go to fix. Some of them, sometimes you may have to interact with your web development team to have these codes updated. Now, 301 is very common, and I think most of us have utilized that. That basically tells that 301s are a permanent redirection from one source to the other. 302 is temporary and should be used very sparingly. And of course, we can go all the way to 500. That could actually mean that you have a server error. These kind of errors should be actually contact your web development team to understand what could be causing such errors. Now, I have mentioned a couple of tools in this conversation that we've had, but depending upon your requirements and your website, here are some of the tools that you can use. Some of them have a couple of sections that are available for free. You can also have a higher versions of those tools for an individual where you can buy individual subscriptions. And if you are an enterprise client, you can actually get the enterprise license as well for some of these tools. So depending upon your business requirements, feel free to access any of the tools. With that, I would say thank you. And it was great presenting to everyone here. I can stop to share and see if there are any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Tanu. And we have some questions here. What types of websites got the most traffic?
That's could be anybody. I don't understand. Is it an industry or a news article, or Amazon for e-commerce? The person who has asked this question, do they want to specify the industry that they want to talk to? Because that's a very broad question as to which
Okay.
websites get most traffic.
Okay. Can you tell me about a short glimpse on that one, if you don't mind?
In what?
In the e-commerce industry, using that
If you
e-commerce.
think of e-commerce, again, depending upon the industry, but if you think of it, today, Amazon is a big market player for traffic. So if you can think of that, then followed by Shopify, they have a larger volume as well. But if you get into maybe medical grade or medical instruments, they could be Thermo Fisher, there could be, if you're thinking about computers, it could be, and I'm just making this up, it could be Microsoft because they have so many laptops, or it could be Dell for all we know. So it depends upon the e-commerce industry that you would say. But if I had to just say a broader e-commerce question, it probably would be Amazon.
Thank you, Ms. Tanu. And one more question, few tips on right keywords, how to find the right keyword. Do you have any tips on that one? So the participant can get the knowledge about that, how to.
So you can look into Google Analytics to see what kind of keywords, but otherwise in the Google Search Console, you have the keyword reports, the query reports. You should certainly look at that. The other way to find keywords, which I personally like, is Ahref. If you can do both from a keyword research where you can just put the broader keyword, let's say cloud computing, and the rest of the words can come into it. Or alternatively, if you have your website or the web page that you want to optimize, you can put that URL into Ahref, and then it can submit some suggestions that may be useful for that particular page based on the website, the content that it has. Folks have also found a very good utility for SEMrush as well. And you can try a couple of these tools to find keywords. You can even do it in Mars, but I would say you can begin with Ahref. They do have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, their keyword generator is free, so anybody can access that.
Another question, how to improve core web vitals of a website for mobile?
That's a very, very broad question, and I probably can have a presentation for another presentation on that basis. So that's a really great question. One of the key things about core vitals is actually breaking down into understanding what your page template is. When is your first content that's getting loaded? And I would say that for mobile, it is really essential to test your lazy loading or not. The best way to do is not change your template. Maybe the image loads maybe 3 seconds late or 2 seconds late, but ensure that the template gets fully loaded. So that's one piece that I would highly recommend. The other thing is, depending upon your design, it should be responsive so that a desktop version can actually render enough in mobile as well. Do test if your design has any challenge on rendering on mobile, because that will impact your core vitals for a mobile piece. Images, video, check your validation for images, because they do have a particular resolution that it should have. So ensure that your design is responsive enough to ensure that resolution gets rendered. Another piece for mobile is important is that all your feature articles or feature content should have imagery associated with it. So that allows you to rank much better.
Thank you, Ms. Tanu. It's a wonderful presentation on our 5th GDMS conference.
Thank you so much. Have everybody.